it's serious, isn't it?
Right, well, good evening everybody and welcome to the webinar. Thank you very much for all joining us. We know it's a busy time of the year and it's a busy evening, and we appreciate you all joining us on Blue Monday. My name is Amy Burke, I'm the Skills Manager at AHDB, and I'm joined this evening by Vicki Beers from FCN and Olly Harrison, arable farm up here. We are currently sat in Olly's farm kitchen around the kitchen table, which is a perfect setting for the conversation we're about to have, and generally a conversation. We're going to be talking about mental health, and we're using the AHDB platform really just to, because it's been quite successful, but it is going to be FCN. They're going to be doing the webinar this evening with the help of Olly, and I will be handing over to those guys shortly. So, as I say, this webinar has been quite successful. We've had over 677 people registered, and I think that is quite a sign of the engaged interest in this topic at the moment, and currently. So a bit of housekeeping before I hand over. So we will have all attendees will be muted. You'll notice you won't be able to talk throughout. However, there is a question box on the right hand side of your screen. If you type your questions in, we'll be able to see those. They are anonymous though, so other people on the webinar won't be able to see them. So feel free to be open and we will just answer the questions. We may not get through all the questions as there's so many attendees, but we'll be able to filter through some of them and answer them afterwards, and we'll be able to signpost you to the place to get further support. Yeah, so we'll have questions throughout, but also at the end. We're aiming to finish at 8 o'clock. We may go over slightly, but hopefully within the hour. And the recordings afterwards, the most important bit. The recordings will be made available, so you'll be sent a link with the recording, plus a lot of the tools that we talk about, you'll receive those as well afterwards. Okay, so without further ado, let's understand who everybody is. So that's me on the left-hand side, looking smiley. As I say, Amy Burke, Skills Development Manager at AHDB. So we work with farmers to inspire training and development, both for personal and also for the staff. And one of those key issues is, you know, what do you do if you notice a member of staff is struggling? And so that's why we thought this was a great platform to start tackling those issues and supporting that. I'm joined by Olly. Olly, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Olly Harrison. I'm the county, sorry, not the county advisor, that's my sister. I'm the county chairman for Lancashire, NFU at the moment, and the combinable crops advisor and a farmer who has a keen interest in mental health after losing a friend a few years ago through suicide.
Thanks, Olly. And we've got Vicki from FCN.
Yeah, Vicki Beers. I'm the National Partnerships Manager for FCN. My role is very much about working alongside other charities and government organisations and commercial organisations to try and make sure we're getting the best support possible out to farmers. I'm also married to a farmer and have 3 sons, 2 of those are farming as well, so very much part of the farming community.
Great, thanks guys. So you'll hear a little bit more about Olly's story and why he's here a bit later, but I think it'd be great if we get kicked off, Vicki, if you wouldn't mind, just talking a bit about so why FCN and what are some of the reasons behind the reason to have FCN?
Well, just really very quickly, FCN are a charitable organisation, and we are a community of volunteers that are there to support farmers with any problem at all, really. We do a lot of practical support for farmers, but we are seeing a lot more of our calls that are coming to us involve mental well-being. As an industry and as a charity, we are concerned about the suicide levels that are particularly high in farming, poor mental well-being generally, high levels of stress. Physical ill health is a problem in farming, overwork, and all of these things have an impact on business management, managing change, animal welfare, and on-farm accidents as well.
Okay, so further to that, so Olly, you know, anything that you kind of recognise with these key concerns?
Well, I think everyone will be able to recognise something when we go through everything eventually. With agriculture, there's so many different challenges that are out of your control, and that's one of the big issues, mainly the weather. Then we've also got markets, we've got livestock health and things like that. We've got relationships, either be it at home or with colleagues or with family members and different things. There's just basically always something every day that's challenged us, I suppose. It's known as having one of the highest suicide rates as well, agriculture. And can I also say, I didn't know you were going to ask me about this slide as well.
Okay.
I think, you know, whilst we're concerned in the agricultural world, there's problems just generally, and directly or indirectly, some form of mental health problem is going to affect every single family in the UK. Up to 2/3 of people who are suffering with mental illness also need help because of discrimination and stigma. And I think most of us could quite honestly say that if we see somebody fall over in the street, we'll rush to help them up. But actually, if we see somebody who appears to be struggling with a mental well-being issue, then we're quite likely to cross the road or maybe be a little bit nervous about offering help to those people. But it is a staggering figure in agriculture that more than one member of the farming community dies by suicide every single week in the UK. And you know, it's a big statistic, and it's a big concern, and it's something we need to be looking at.
That is a huge statistic.
Yeah, I mean, just local to us, there's an area they did have the highest suicide rate in the country per capita, because the only people that lived there were farmers, and over a space of about 10 or 15 years, there was, you know, sort of 7 or 8 of them that took their lives. You know, it's massive. I lost a friend. It's coming up to 4 years this May, and the annoying thing was, I never saw the signs. I didn't understand anything about it really, and I always looked up to him, and I thought, you know, he was doing well in himself and in his farming career, if you will, but it was such a shock. And it's only when I've learned more about mental health and well-being I've realised that the signs were there all along, and we just didn't notice them. So that's why we need to talk about it more and do more about it.
So we've spoken quite a lot about mental health, but what does mental health actually mean?
Well, the World Health Organization actually defined mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to contribute to his or her community. I think when a friend or a colleague talks to us about their physical health or their physical well-being, and perhaps starting an exercise regime or changing their diet, we see it as quite a positive conversation. Yeah. But if somebody comes to us and wants to start talking about their mental health, we immediately think of that as being a negative, whereas actually we all have good and bad physical and mental well-being, and that will fluctuate depending on what else is happening in our lives.
So the definition describes, you know, normal stress in life, can work productively and fruitfully. So Olly, what are the kind of things that would prevent you and prevent you working productively from a sort of mental health perspective?
I think when you are struggling from time to time with different pressures, one of the first things I'll notice in myself if I'm not feeling right is I'll get quite forgetful, or I can't make decisions. You know, you think to yourself, should we do this today, or should we do that, or what's the weather going to do? And I find it really difficult to actually function, if you will, thinking, oh, what do I need to do here? But when you're happy and everything's going well, and, you know, it isn't raining outside and nothing's broken, you know, you can make decisions really quickly. And I think that's one of the things that I'd never seen it in myself until I learned more about it. But because I do know now in myself, when I think, well, you know, I'm not feeling so good today, I always think, well, I'll have a good whinge to someone and that'll make me feel better.
Thank you. Now we do have some questions coming in, which we will get to shortly, but we're just going to go and talk a few more statistics, if that's all right.
So the Farmers Weekly in 2018 published the results of a survey that they did as part of their Fit to Farm campaign. And I find this really interesting that farmers are so prepared to actually speak up and be very open about how they're feeling. But I think there's many of these things that we understand immediately. I mean, 65 hours per week is on average what most farmers work, 11 days holiday taken a year. But interestingly, 81% of farmers admitted that they had trouble sleeping. 1 in 10 were involved in a farm accident within the last 12 months. 36% of farmers felt that they were not in good physical health, but actually 45% of farmers said that they were not in good mental health. And in some ways, I think it's a testament to us as an industry that we've raised awareness and that farmers are starting to recognise that and feel able to admit that they're not in good mental health. But I think we do need to look at an industry and as individuals about what the stresses are that are leading to that sort of statistic.
See, this is obviously the UK that we're talking about because it was the Farmers Weekly that did the survey, but in Finland, the form of DEFRA or maybe AHDB, they actually pay each year for relief, if you've got a livestock farm, for relief milkers or relief herdsmen to come to your farm and look after your livestock, and you have to have 2 weeks holiday a year paid for by the state.
That's quite interesting because we've just had a question come through from somebody who's asked what do
AHDB do?
What do AHDB do, or NFU? So well, AHDB, we support organisations that are already there in support. But NFU, you are actually part of the project at the moment, aren't you, Olly?
Yeah. So when I took over as county advisor in the Northwest, the communications guy, Carl, he said, "Oh, what do you want to leave as a legacy when you're no longer chairman after 2 years?" Anyway, I thought about it. I thought, well, what could I do that'll make a real difference? So we set up with a guy who used to work for the NFU, Aaron Nake, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. He did a Nuffield scholarship on mental health and wellbeing within the agricultural sector, and he went all over the world and he come back with all these findings. And I was at a meeting with him to do with RABI, it's another charity similar to FCN, and he was talking about what they'd been doing in different countries, and he was telling me how in New Zealand the milk tanker drivers are trained to spot poor signs of mental health on the farms that they go to, because some of them remote farms, the only people that they'll see is the milk tanker driver. And I thought that's a really good way of doing it, because if you have some sort of seminar or a workshop and you invite people that might be struggling with their health, they wouldn't turn up. My friend, he wouldn't have gone to something like that. We just used to think he just didn't really like going out much, but he had anxiety. He didn't like crowds. He didn't like meeting people. And you can run as many events as you want, but the people that turn up, that are struggling, the people that are struggling will not turn up. So what we started doing is we're doing these Are You Well Aware workshops. We're doing one actually at the end of this week. Sorry, next week, the 31st. We invite people that meet farmers every day. So that's like vets, agronomists, feed reps, fuel reps, anyone really, that insurance salesman for the NFU, anyone like that that's calling on farms and meeting farmers every day. We do a morning session and we teach them how to spot the signs and what to say, and more importantly, not what to say to people that we think may be struggling. And they've been really popular. So we've done it in the Northwest, and I've just been talking to Stuart before, from Stuart Roberts from NFU, and he's hoping that within the next few months we'll be able to roll out more across the whole country.
I think that's brilliant, actually, and it's very much what I see going on in the industry. The organisations I'm working with, there's a dairy organisation that we're working with at the moment who I know have given mental health first aid training to some of their tanker drivers, and they're rolling that out. But I see the industry really pulling together to try and tackle this issue, and I find that really reassuring.
Yeah. So we've just had a couple of questions that probably get answered in the next couple of slides. So is isolation a factor? Is financial pressure a factor? Could you talk us through that? Okay.
Absolutely. So I think some of the things that we all love about farming and the industry and the lifestyle are also some of the things that actually lead us to sort of feeling pressured and feeling stressed. And it is a risky and volatile industry to work in. A lot of the issues are completely beyond our control. animal disease, weather, as Olly mentioned earlier, can cause an enormous amount of stress. Add to that politics, and you know, I think when you're dealing with lots of stress, although we all love at times the loneliness and the isolation of our lifestyle, actually that can become a real problem when you're dealing with lots of other things as well, because you've got an awful lot of time on your own to think about things, don't you? Long hours out in the fields with lots of time on your own, not necessarily interacting with other people. Often farmers will say that the only person that they see on a regular basis is the vet or the agronomist, or you know, a person that they're doing business with, because they just don't get off the farm. We don't have as many livestock markets as we had before, so that's adding pressure. And then there's pressure from single issue groups as well. There's a lot of pressure coming at us online and in the press, and I think when we're dealing with so many other things, it can just add to the stresses. Rural crime is on the increase as well, so it's a combination of all of these things.
I think as well, that's probably why a lot of farmers use Twitter, because they can be isolated on a tractor or whatever when they can talk to other people. And the problem with that is you get the activists on there with the anti-pesticide or vegans or whatever, kind of hurling insults and stuff, but you just have to take it with a pinch of salt and laugh at them, really.
Absolutely. There's also a huge family pressure. It's that pressure of not wanting to let the generation before you down. If things aren't going well, you don't want to let your father down, or your grandfather, or even your great-grandfather. And then there's the future generation of not having something to hand on to your children. So that carries an awful lot of pressure and guilt and all sorts of complicated feelings alongside it. It's much more than just a business.
Of course. So we have got quite a few questions coming through. I know that a few of them are going to get answered with the next couple of slides, so we'll just carry on. But if anything's not going to get answered, I will read your question out. We will carry on. So tell us more about the pressures that farmers are facing then, Vicki.
Well, there's lots of things going on, and I mean this slide really is just it's an illustration of some headlines that were cut from the Farmers Weekly, just from one particular issue. And it's not here to illustrate that it's all negative news, but actually if you are under pressure and you do have a lot to worry about, then often these are going to be the headlines that you're reading and you're seeing. And you can see just by reading a few of them that there's an awful lot going on, and it's quite easy to feel overwhelmed when there's so many things to be considering that has such a huge impact on both your lifestyle, but more importantly, your business as well.
Definitely. Olly, can you resonate with any of those? I mean, stuff, especially, September, was you feeling a lot of this pressure about?
I'm just reading that. I wish I hadn't drilled my oilseed rape at all. Well, to be fair, that's the only thing I've got growing in the ground at the moment. So yeah, I mean, it's just all the time, isn't it? We're literally battered back from every direction. Right in the middle of their activists, this whole January or whatever you want to call it. If you're a livestock farmer, and you must just be thinking, why am I bothering every morning? Yeah. It's bad enough for me now when I've got no wheat to harvest yet next year, but all the time you're just under criticism through the fact, we're killing all the birds, we're ripping all the trees up, we're damaging all the soil. It's just relentless. And when it's hard enough to make a living out of the job as well, why do we do it? That's the top of it. It's crazy, isn't it? But we've got to look at what we can be thankful for. Often we live in a nice place. If we want to be isolated, we can be. I mean, and I know sometimes I'll have a bad day because the staff will be stressing out. Sometimes I'm actually glad to be on my own and go out on a tractor, but it all depends on the environment you're in.
Yeah, I like that. So we've got a number of pressures here, but what's the main pressures that you are finding that people seek help for?
Well, we sort of get a bit of a gauge from the calls that we get through to our helpline for support from FCN, and the main one is financial. Most of the calls that we get, or a good proportion of them, involve financial issues. A lot of people now are telling us that they are stressed, they are anxious, there's some form of mental well-being concern as well alongside that. But FCN, we have about 40 volunteers who man our helpline, and about 400 volunteers across England and Wales, and it's really important that we're able to get one of our local volunteers out to sit with the farming family and start discussing what the issues are, because it's very rarely one particular issue. There may be financial problems, but they may have come about because there's been numerous TV breakdowns. There could be a bereavement or a family issue, family relationship breakdown, and all of those things need to be addressed. So it sometimes takes 1 or 2 meetings before we even start understanding where those issues are, where the stresses are coming from, and then helping the farmer to start prioritising and working their way through those issues to start taking some of the pressures away.
Am I right in reading this, that within 8 months you had nearly 300 calls purely for the financial stress?
That is our main. I don't know if that. I mean, there's.
I'm looking at BPS and Natural England as well. That's astonishing.
Yeah.
Do they know about this slide?
Which is a financial issue, isn't it?
It is, of course.
And I sometimes wonder if it's. I suppose it's a little bit sometimes the case of you're only going to pick up that phone and make a call when the straws hit the camel's back.
Yeah.
So this is telling us what that reactor is on the day, and this is
because the weather's really low on there,
Exactly.
but obviously you can't do anything
You're
about the weather.
You're not going to phone a helpline about the weather necessarily, are you? The weather may have had an impact though when you're not doing your drilling, which is then led to a financial issue. So, and this is just what the callers are telling us from their very first phone call. So when we go out and start working with those farmers, then often we'll find out that actually there's a lot of other issues going on behind the scenes, but this is what they actually phone for and pick up the phone. And maybe a financial reason to pick up a phone is much more acceptable than picking up the phone because you've had a family relationship breakdown. We're practical.
I know we were talking last week in an NFU meeting about late BPS payments and the anxiety and the stress that can cause. Because rather than the RPA coming out and saying, oh, your BPS is late because we've not processed it yet, they don't tell you that. Your BPS is late and you don't know why, and you think, well, am I going to get it?
When you're going to get it.
And that's the thing we're saying.
Yeah.
Communicate more. If you've not done it, don't be embarrassed and say, oh, it's still sat in a pile and not processed, because it will. That's what you should do, because it will make the person that's not had it feel better.
Exactly.
Because when it doesn't turn up when everyone else has had theirs, you just think, well, I've filled something wrong, I've done something wrong, I'm not going to get it.
Yeah, it's that worry of the unknown, isn't it? And we work really closely with RPA to, just to be the voice of the farmer, I suppose, and to help them to understand what processes are perhaps adding to stress, but also, we can help them by making those phone calls and trying to find out what the problems are there and when that can be expected. So a lot of the support that our volunteers give is quite practical, actually. Yeah.
There are, just to highlight, financial being the sort of top stress, there are on the AHDB website, there are some free to use tools to understand your business, your finances. We've done previous webinars on those, so have a listen in. Right, okay then. So what's stress? We've talked about stress quite a lot. So what do we say about stress then?
Well, we all experience stress. Stress is just a natural process which helps us to assess how to deal with the situation. So it's basically our adrenaline glands releasing hormones and our body stepping into action. So really handy if you need to get away from a saber-toothed tiger or get out of the way of a bus that's coming towards you. But actually it can be really positive. Some people thrive on stress and they can work under stress to reach a deadline, to pass an exam, to get an assignment in. I think what we need to be worried about is when we're working at high levels of stress for prolonged periods of time. And I often will say to people that I'm working with that if you imagine your most stressful week as a team and you're all trying to reach a deadline and you're really working at full capacity, there can be a bit of an excitement about that, that trying to get harvest in before it rains excitement. But actually then imagine you were doing that every single week, all year, every year. it just wouldn't be sustainable. So it's just that.
And if you were on your own as well.
Exactly, yeah. So stress necessarily isn't a bad thing, but too much of it over a long period of time can then start affecting our mental well-being.
Okay. Okay, and then we're going to have a look at what that looks like.
A student actually at Harper Adams produced these images for us, and I think they're a really good illustration from a practical point of view of what carrying around too much stress can do and what impact it can have on you. We all have everyday stress, so being caught on the M6, losing your car keys, losing your dog.
A fire in the office.
A fire in the office, you know, and that's daily stress will fluctuate from day to day. There's nothing really you can do about that sort of stress. If you're a dairy farmer negotiating your milk contract, then you're going to have a slightly higher level of stress perhaps at that time, having to get silage in, another sort of added stress. And then all of a sudden you have a TB breakdown. So loss of stock, emotional turmoil, tensions in the family, extra work, all of those things are going to push your stress to the limit. And I heard somebody talk about this recently and describe it as carrying, how much stress you're carrying around in your bucket. And if you're carrying a full bucket and it's full to capacity, you only need one more thing to happen and come into that bucket that you're not expecting it for it then to start having an impact on your well-being.
I presume that's what the red line represents in the pictures.
Well, yes.
So that's what you say when I had it up to here.
Yeah, I had it up to here, exactly, that's it, can't take any more.
And everyone's different, aren't they? And
exactly.
That's the key point. So, Olly, what stresses you out? Do you recognise what stresses you out, or do you not notice until you've erupted?
No, I think I do. I'm definitely more aware than I used to be. The weather, the last few years has just been unbelievable. I mean, driving the combine 2018, going into fields that look stunning and there was nothing there, and you just think it's a long time till next harvest when you can start again, and you've got your financial commitments going out every month. That's always playing on your mind. Working with family members, I won't name them, but they're older than me. that can be very stressful sometimes. You know, when you know more what's going on than they do, that can cause problems sometimes, and they can start interfering. And that's where I've been learning a lot about communicating better with different family members, so that they're still in the loop. So that's probably one of the things that stresses me out the most. So I'll go off the farm for a day and I'll come back and I'll set a lot of tasks to be done for the staff we've got, and then when I come back and find that none of it's been done because we'd have to give them a different job to do, that really winds me up. So it's getting him to understand. So we have a WhatsApp group now with everyone in it, including me dad, and when things change during the day, I can just send a text to one place and then everyone knows what's going on. And that lowers my stress levels a lot when I come back and everyone's understood. But I've got to say, it's probably the weather. I mean, at 2 years I did have a late BPS, and that was stressful because I was thinking, I feel something wrong here now. What have I done? Yeah. You know, and you know, I've ordered all my fertilizer to be paid for, and it's arrived, and you're like, where's my BPS? So trying to learn how to not need it's probably the best answer for that, because who knows how long we've got it for.
Right, we're not mentioning Brexit tonight, Olly.
I didn't, right. You just did.
We'll move on to stress monitoring, because we've had some questions from the delegates asking, you know, how do you start recognising stress? What's it look like? How can I support my staff? And, you know, as you said, the first thing to do is to recognise it. So what are we looking for?
I think when we have a read through these, we'll all recognise these signs in ourselves, and often when we talk to people about these signs, people will nod and they recognise the signs, but then if you ask somebody if they recognise them and then do they do something about it, that's the important bit really. So, I mean, cognitive symptoms, or the way our brain functions, memory problems, inability to concentrate, seeing only the negative. I won't go through all of these one by one, but constant worrying, racing thoughts. These are things that we all have from time to time, and some of us, especially me, memory problems, you know, a lot of people would say I have that all of the time, but you know what's the norm for you. So if all of a sudden that's much worse, then that could be a stress sign.
Okay.
And then emotional symptoms, you might notice these on other people as well. So moodiness, short temper, feeling overwhelmed is something you probably understand in yourself a bit better, but sense of isolation or loneliness. So that person who always turns up to the pub or always turns up to the meeting but all of a sudden isn't turning up, you know, perhaps they don't feel that they're able to do that.
So sometimes though they can be there physically but not there
Exactly.
mentally, I suppose. Yeah,
absolutely. And then physical signs: aches and pains, diarrhea, nausea, dizziness, chest pains, loss of sex drive. These aren't necessarily things that you want to know about your customers or your workmates, and they're not necessarily things that you'll notice, but you know, these can all be signs of stress. And that person who's constantly off work may be, you know, struggling with stress. It may be because very few of us, if we do need to take time off for stress, will actually admit that it's because of stress. You know, we have lots of go-to reasons.
Why do you think people do? Why do you think people won't admit that it's stress?
probably pride, isn't it? Maybe
pride, and I think there's still so much stigma attached. It is still seen as a weakness or a failing, and you know, that's what we all need to pull together to try and address, really. And then behavioural symptoms, and again, you know, we all know when we're doing these things, but eating more, eating less, sleeping too much or sleeping too little, isolating yourselves, we've already talked about, neglecting responsibilities, using alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, you know, when it becomes too much, it's your go-to coping mechanism.
I just eat chocolate.
Eating chocolate, I think that falls into the eating too much, Ollie. And nervous habits, biting your nails, pacing, tapping, you know, there's lots of things. I think the important thing is to understand what your signs are and to recognise that and then to act on it, really. It's being prepared to then manage the stress and recognise what the signs are.
So managing stress.
So identify what your stresses are. So know the things that cause you stress. I think Ollie knows what his stresses are, but I'm not sure he can avoid them. So
no.
Avoid your stresses if at all possible. So if you're one of those people who really struggles to stand up in public and speak, and it's part of your job, you know, do you really have to do that, or is there a colleague who would be happy to do that? You know,
yeah, but this is where I disagree slightly with this. I mean, feel the fear and do it anyway, and then
if you're strong enough to cope with that.
Yeah.
I had a friend who's one of the most confident people I know, but and you know, life and soul of the party, but when he had to speak once a year to his board of trustees, he wouldn't sleep for weeks beforehand and would literally make himself physically ill. You know, if you're strong enough, I agree with you, and you know, I like to see things as a challenge, and I do like to step out of my comfort zone, but I think, you know, it's that if you're carrying your bucket full, and
going
you can
into
avoid
it,
that thing that's going to tip you over the edge, then it might be a good thing to pass over at that time.
Like you said a couple of slides ago, you said everyone's bucket's different, isn't it?
It is,
what stresses you out like?
I think as well, a lot with farming, the stresses, most of them are unavoidable. And sometimes there'll be small jobs and you think, oh, putting it off, and then they all multiply then. And if you lay awake at night, you think, I need to do this, need to do that. If you write a list and then you do them jobs and you tick them off the list every time you do them, it's only a line for a piece of paper, but it really helps.
Yeah, that's my go-to coping mechanism.
And just getting rid of them, or if you've got to ring someone up and you think, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, because I find it difficult. You know, someone owes you money, like chasing up invoices and stuff, I always find it difficult, but they when you ring, they know why you're ringing anyway, so they speak first anyway. So, but it's one of them things that you tick it off. You think, well, I've done that, and it all helps to sort of like empty a bit out your bucket, maybe. Yeah,
even putting things from my to-do list on a Friday onto Monday makes me put them somewhere in my mind. I'm not going to worry about them all weekend because I've got a strategy. They've gone somewhere.
Yeah, well, I won't open emails now after
No,
6 o'clock at
no.
night, because if it's hassle on it, I don't want to know
Yeah.
till the next day.
So it's finding the way that you're able to.
They're avoidable
manage.
ones, then, aren't they, I suppose?
I suppose
Yeah.
they are, aren't they? And the most important one, I think, is talking. So talking with others and being open about the way you're feeling when you need to be, and also talking to your friends and family about the way they're feeling. I think that's one of the most powerful things that we can be doing.
Yeah, talking of which, how do you interact with your stressed family and friends? We've had a few questions about, you know, what should you do if you're concerned about a staff member? You know, what really is the advice on this one?
Mm-hmm. Well, showing you care is not going to make things worse. I think we're all a little frightened about talking about mental health. We're worried we're going to make things worse, or we're going to say the wrong thing. It is actually more important to listen, and asking them is just, you know, it's not going to make things worse, but it might actually give somebody permission to talk to you, and to open up about how they are feeling, and then, you know, perhaps in time find support. And I think listening to people, giving them time and space to open up, asking them how they are, and making sure you follow that up with how are you really. Don't try and diagnose. None of us here are clinicians. I think it's really important to make that point. Well, as far as I know, none of us here, I'm certainly not.
No.
We're all talking from our own experience and from the roles that we have within the agricultural world. But, you know, don't try and diagnose. Don't be judgmental. It's not really up to us to try and find solutions, and we don't know what the situation is. We don't know what's going on. So it's just really important to let that person talk, not try and second guess how they're feeling, and then offer to find support for them and help signpost them to somebody who can give them the support that they need, depending on what the issues are that they're dealing with.
I mean, we're all guilty of it. Someone will ring us up and say, "You okay?" And you go, "Yeah, fine." Nowadays, if I'm not, I'll say, "Well, no, not really. I've had better days." And they'll say, "Oh, why? What do you mean?" You just say, "Oh, what's bothering you?" Then you generally find they'll tell you what's bothering them, and then the phone call might last 20 minutes longer than it should have done, but when you both come off the phone, you both feel a bit better. So that's what I always do now. Or if I know someone's, you know, not quite themselves, I'll say, "You okay?" And they'll say, "Yeah," and I'll say, "Really?" And then, you know, then it's the pause, it's the power of the pause, and just wait to see what they say.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we've got in actually on the next slide, I think. Amy.
Oh, well, so we thought we'd just ask a couple of questions while we're on this topic. So we've got, so do you have an experience of or examples of farm cluster groups and how they can work in support?
I actually heard a farmer speaking quite recently about how him and his neighbours are dealing with the threat of TB, and they set up a really informal group, completely informal, but they just pick up the phone and give each other a call occasionally to find out how they're feeling, and just to check in on people, to make sure that each of the people in that group are actually having an opportunity to chat, because we're finding that in the edge areas, TB is a huge concern. It's that fear of getting it is almost as impactful as actually getting it. So having a group of people who are happy to talk to, that are your go-to people that you know you can actually express those concerns to, can be really powerful, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe if it was location sort of based, maybe it could be some sort of WhatsApp based thing. You know, if people are all over the country and they just wanted a group to chat to, you could do something around that, couldn't you?
So this is quite a good question. So how feasible do you think it would be to set up a support structure for farmers and self-employed in the industry, either with FCN or a charity? I see a real need in having experienced managers and skilled labour via charitable support. So having sort of charity supporting within the teams, what do you think to that? Is that kind of what you guys do?
So you're thinking, I think you're probably talking about more of a mentoring role. Am I right in thinking that? So yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that, and I know quite a few people have expressed an interest in having that, and it's something we seem to be lacking in this country. I mean, there is opportunities. If you're an NFU member, that that is a possibility, and there's lots of organisations that are providing this sort of support. It's a difficult thing for a charity to provide, and I think it's something that we'd all like to see happening, but it's difficult for us to be able to be experts in all fields. And although our volunteers give really very practical support and can sit down and help talk somebody through the process that they might need to expect if they have a TB breakdown, to have a volunteer who can understand the whole width and breadth of farming is quite an ask for a charity. But I do think there's a real need for go-to sort of mentors or champions who can support farmers.
Another person's put that you've got sort of agronomists, you've got those third parties that are going down the farm drive, and is a potential for those kind of people to be trained in support.
Well, this is what we're doing with the NFU in the northwest, but like I say, we are rolling out across the country, and a lot of what we teach is not just what to say, but how to listen and what not to say.
And FCN are doing exactly the same thing with most of the assessors and agronomists and farmer-facing staff members are all asking for this training. So,
and where can people find out more about both of those?
Well, NFU, we're always tweeting it or putting it on our website and different things. You will see a lot more of it. That's all I can say. And I don't know, maybe next time there's something happening, maybe AHDB could also share it for us.
Yeah,
that's a start. We also, in our region, I don't know what other regions have, but we have an agricultural discussion society. So we meet once a month through the winter for 7 months of the year, and we have different speakers. But it's a social gathering, so we get about 80 or 90 farmers. They all turn up, and they all have a drink at the bar beforehand. We have a meal and tables at 10 or whatever it might be, and then afterwards everyone sort of hangs around, has a good chew the fat, and put the world to rights. And I think that really helps a lot of people, because a lot of them, it's probably the only thing they go to in the winter.
The social element's a good one, and we've got a really fantastic comment here, which I think will carry on with the slides after this comment. There's so many questions coming through, and we are thankful that the questions are coming through. So this is a great one. So can you just make the point that there are a lot of positive networks to be found on social media? Which can help with the feelings of isolation. Importantly, there are block and mute buttons. That is so important, honestly. Thanks for this comment. There's ways to do it, and you can just Google the way to do it, but you can put a block, so you don't get the vegans or you don't get people that you don't want to be seeing or engaging with you. So this person said, use the time to create positive networks, and I couldn't agree any more with that comment.
Often though, if I'm having a bad day, I can't take it out on my staff, but I can take it out on a vegan on Twitter.
We do not condone that. Right. Okay, so we'll carry on because we've got a couple more slides to get through.
I mean, I never mentioned Brexit, Amy did, but we've changed. There's always opportunity, so we shouldn't worry about that.
Yeah,
it will not be catastrophic.
There we go. Right, so back to the questions of how do you interact with people.
I think Olly's point earlier was really good about asking people twice. We seem to live in a society where we spend all day walking past people saying, "Are you all right? How are you? You okay?" And people ask me that constantly all day. And actually, I sort of recognise that those people aren't necessarily asking me how I am. They're just saying hello. And when I ask people how they are, I don't necessarily want to know how they are at that particular moment. But I would say that if you have a neighbour and you know they're going through a difficult patch, or you have a colleague and you know there's problems at home or illness in the family, then ask them twice how they are. Don't just leave it at that. Just say, I know you're going through a tough time. How are things really? Or are you sure you're okay? Or that person who is usually life and soul of the party in the pub all of a sudden is the quiet one and sitting back. Drop them a text and say, are you sure everything's okay? You're not yourself. There's a really powerful campaign called the Ask Twice campaign. And it is basically that you don't know what's going on behind a smile. And I think often it's our go-to protection. If we're feeling bad, we put a big smile on our face and we try and soldier on. and it's important to try and delve a bit deeper.
Yeah, I think as well, kind words can go a long way. I mean, if you think someone's stressed and you ask them, and then you ask them twice and they don't really open up, you know, just saying to them, oh, you know, I think you're doing amazingly well with all what you've got going on, whatever it might be, because you know, you will know a lot about them, whether it's they've just had a breakup or they've got terrible weather or they've got TB or whatever. You know, if you give them some admiration, they'll remember that, and it can mean a lot to them, especially if they're in that place.
Trust as well, isn't it, for them when they decide that they want to talk, they might come back.
So if you don't want to say how are you, because that's quite you're going to get a one word answer, right? You're going to get fine or great. What else can you ask?
There's lots of things. You know, you'll know what's appropriate for the time, and I think you know, it's going back to the showing you care is not going to do any harm. But you know, I'm concerned about you. How are you? It seems like you've got a lot going on. You don't seem yourself today to talk about it. We know what's right at the time, and it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And if somebody does open up, then can I help you find support? Have you thought about, there's so many amazing organisations out there who are providing support for people. They may just need a friend to talk to. It may be more practical support that they need. There might be much more going on, but offering to help them find the support. If somebody is stressed and struggling, it's much more difficult to find the appropriate support and to know where to look. So helping to find that might just help them have permission to go and find it as well.
Okay.
It's important as well to, if they're telling you what's going on, don't compare yourself to them. Don't say, oh, I've been through this or I've been through that, because to in their mind, you're well, and it belittles what they're telling you. So you kind of need to just agree and listen, really, and let them do the talking.
I think actually as humans, we always want to try and help find a solution.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You always offer solutions when they say, oh, you know, this is happening, that's happening. You're like, well, what about this? And have you tried that? Have you tried that? Of course they have.
And
it doesn't work.
That's not our role, is it?
Yeah.
Great. So there are a number of tools and resources out there, and actually I've just had a moment to read through the questions, and everybody has such great support and advice, and you know, like the cluster groups that someone mentioned, you know, if you had a social cluster group for this, there's a real amount of support. There's some suggestions on here that I couldn't even think of myself. So this slide here is from Jana, and this just talks through. It's an acronym for tractor, because we all love tractors. So you know, I'm just going to read through these. So you know, tell the person you're worried about them. We've mentioned that a few times. Just saying, you know, showing your concern, reaching out and listening. You both mentioned listening being such a key point,
which is really hard to do when you're a problem solver kind of person.
Of course.
You just don't want to listen. You just, as soon as you hear the first few words, you'll interrupt and say, well, what about this? And it's so difficult to be an active listener.
We had a comment come through, just only ask how you are if you want to listen. Don't say to somebody, how are you? And then when they start, then go somewhere else.
Or talk about yourself.
And that leads on to asking them, you know, what's going on? Where are you? Stay with them if you're really concerned, you know, stay there. Stay calm and supportive. Offer the help. So that then, you know, if you're really concerned about someone, see a specialist. As we've mentioned, you know, we're not experts or consultants here. We can signpost you to the right direction. If it gets to a certain level, go to A&E and then remove the means. So, you know, we're talking at the extreme level now. If you've got come across staff and you're at this level, you know, remove the means of self-harm and take them to A&E.
Can we change it to tractors with an S on the end? And
what's the S for, Ollie?
Speak. Because it's good to talk.
That's a really good point.
Of course you can.
And you've got to have more than one tractor.
Of course. And then the other tools that we've got.
There's loads of good, fantastic bits of material out there and tools. Yellow Welly's little book of Minding Your Head has some fantastic links to organisations that are there to support. The Fit for Farming book, you can find a link to that on either FCN's website or the Farmwell website. That's also just talks about looking after yourself physically and mentally, and just really straightforward, basic sort of messaging. I think you've got that book, haven't you, Olly?
Yeah.
Good. So we've talked quite a lot about how you identify stress, how you manage stress, and some resources to help with that. But is there more you can do to even prevent it? You know, not even getting to that point. What can you do, Vicky?
I think there's lots of really important things that we can do to be positive and to try and look after our, to do some sort of preventative work, I suppose, on ourselves. But in last year, we had Doug Avery, a New Zealand farmer, came out and did a tour of the UK on behalf of FCN and Northern Ireland Rural Support. And he very much told his own personal journey of poor mental health and a lot of really challenging situations that he's faced on his farm in New Zealand. And his message very much is about resilience. And Doug says that resilience isn't about having not having bad times. It's about having the tools to recover from difficulties and to adapt and to bounce forward. And he says that, you know, if you come up against a brick wall, you don't want to be bouncing back to where you were and the situation that caused that. You want to learn from that and bounce forward and become stronger from it. So I know AHDB you have a link on your website to Doug's talk, and I would definitely recommend going and having a look at that. He's got some really practical ideas.
I think so. So I personally went to one of the workshops, and something that I noticed was there was a complete diverse in age range and backgrounds. There was nearly 200 people in the room for a starter. Yeah. If that doesn't tell you, you know, everyone is feeling the pressure. And so I believe this kind of stuff is for everyone. And there's been a few comments this evening about, you know, the older generation, they struggle with this stuff and they don't want to talk about it. But believe it or not, that Doug Avery presentation, there was every age. And I think, yeah, just sharing stuff like this, the talk from Doug Avery, he's just interested in a New Zealand farmer. And it just so happens to talk about mental health. They're all interlinked, aren't they?
And I think it's really important to remember that we are resilient. Farmers are resilient. You know, we deal with such an array of issues day in, day out over generations and generations, and we keep going despite all of that.
And we have to be optimists as well, don't we?
Absolutely, we are resilient. But, you know, in our own individual lives, we can do things. So there's lots of things we can do to help build that resilience.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think, again, it's getting back to that talking, one of the most powerful things you can do is staying connected to people, your family, your friends, your neighbours, the industry. You know, text your friends, pick up the phone, go to those meetings, go to the market, have conversations. Talking is always going to be a good thing. Avoid seeing crises as insurmountable. You know, just trying to be positive in your approach to things and not necessarily seeing change as a threat, trying to take charge of that change and making the change happen the way you want it to happen. So taking decisive actions, nurturing your own self-worth, challenging yourself, taking care of yourself, probably more important than anything else, really. It's all very well having a great farming business, but if you're not looking after yourself, I mean, farmers say that your head and your physical health and your mental well-being is the most important bit of kit on the farm, isn't it, Olly? And if you don't have that, you're not going to have a thriving farming business. So you need to give as much thought to yourself as you do your business.
And as you mentioned earlier on in the slides about, you can recognise the signs of when people aren't taking care of themselves, and so you can recognise it in your staff. So Olly, you know, how do you ensure you've got this sort of resilience? What do you do to make sure you look after your mind?
I think one of the things is to take a step back and look at what you've got and what you've achieved. If what's in the present now is challenging, you can just think, well, oh, actually, I've managed to do this, I've managed to do that, or we've done this once in the past. That can help, and just be thankful for what you've got as well. Make connections, obviously, that, you know, it's all this talking, and, you know, you might find that you can talk to a stranger easier than you can talk to a friend, or you can talk to a relative. So, you know, always be aware of the connections that you're making in life, I suppose. I always try to turn sort of any sort of crisis or difficulty into an opportunity, and it can focus the mind then. And you can think, well, what could I do around this, you know, to actually turn it into a positive. I suppose that's, you know, on this slide here, move towards your goals. I mean, one thing that we've been doing about recently on an AHDB course is setting goals like weekly or daily, and then it's this ticking things off, you know, as you do them. And then you can look back and you can think, well, you know, I feel like I've had a rubbish week and I've not done anything, but actually I've done this, and this, and not be too ambitious. Like, I mean, sometimes in the summer it was really bad weather every morning, and I wake up and think, well, I want to cut that block of land, I want to cut that block of land, I want to get that baled, I want to get that baled. And they were all best case scenarios, and it never happened. And then at the end of the day, you beat yourself up thinking, I've not done that.
Yeah.
So it's just learning to think to yourself, well, let's try just get half of that done. And if we get more, then you'll feel better that night because you've gone above and beyond of what you first set. That's one of the ways I do things now.
And you can't avoid change. Change is coming at you whether you want it or not, isn't it? So you might as well tackle it the way you want to. That's the right way for you, rather than being a victim to it.
It's like,
you can't sidestep it.
Someone once said about getting stuck in traffic. There's no point in getting worked up about it. There's nothing you can do. So you may as well just sit back and see what's on the radio and just look around, because you'll get there at the same amount of time.
100%, yeah. I mean, just through talking tonight and having sort of this opportunity platform of these questions coming through, actually about 80% of what's coming through is people's own coping mechanisms, and I find that's phenomenal that people are suggesting their own coping mechanisms. So we're going to find a way where we can actually put all these into a live space, because there's some really good examples there. We'll carry on. We're going to just keep going because this is going great. So further on from that, so mental well-being and mindfulness at the bottom has been brought up a few times. So we'll mention something like that. Yeah.
So these are fairly universally recognised, I think, as 5 simple steps that we can all sort of aim for to look after our mental well-being. Connect with people just keeps coming up constantly. So good relationships are important, and enjoy those relationships and time we have with our family, our neighbours, our friends, because they're really valuable for your well-being, but also for their well-being.
Somebody has asked about, you know, what about poor relationships and what do you do in that situation?
Well, you seek support, I would say. Yeah, but you talk. If it's affecting your mental well-being, then perhaps you need to find support somewhere else.
I guess the first sign is recognising
it.
Yeah, for a good time, not a long time.
Recognising your stressor and then figuring out something that you can do about that, I would say. Being physically active, I know that's a difficult thing to say to farmers because your job's really practical and really physical, but actually there's so much research that indicates that physical exercise is not just good for your physical health, it's actually good for your mental health.
Well, it's scientific fact. Exercise releases endorphins, which are what make you feel better.
Yeah, so lots of people
that's why I've bought a bike.
Oh, well done.
It's an electric one though.
It could be go for a walk, go for a run, but you know, there's lots of things that we can do, but it's important to take that time, and it will have a huge impact on the way you're feeling. It's definitely worth trying to focus on that. Learning new skills is something we probably don't, I think we forget to do when we leave school and we've been in our job for a long time. You just know things, and then we become a bit scared about learning new skills because we think we might be challenged, but actually that can have a really positive impact. Giving to others, I am very much the sort of person that will talk to strangers and smile at strangers because actually it makes me feel good. And I think, you know, giving to others doesn't have to be a huge donation or a commitment of volunteering or anything as huge as that. It can be as simple as smiling, opening the door, carrying something, helping a neighbour out if you know that they're stretched on the farm. But giving will make you feel as good as the person you're giving to, and that can be a really good strategy.
I think just before you go further, like learn new skills. We don't mean like just going to college and stuff. No. I can go on YouTube and watch TED Talks about different things, and you're learning all the time, and And then a lot of it, you can, when you watch something, you seem to start relating it how you can use it in your life as well. And I think that can really help to develop yourself.
Yeah.
Whether it's TED Talks on mindfulness, you know, but whichever, I think that's a really good way of learning easily.
I think young farmers are so good at doing this. If you go and talk to a young farmers club and you run through these 5 steps, actually they're doing all of that.
Yeah.
They're giving to others, they're learning new skills, they're connecting, they do all of this. And getting back to mindfulness, I mean, I suppose I prefer to think of it as counting my blessings or enjoying, you know, enjoying where I am at that particular time. But we all live in the most beautiful parts of the UK, and we should try and appreciate that. And as Olly said, reflect on the things that you've done well. Take a time to lean on that fence and actually look at what you've done and look at what you've created and live for that moment.
100%.
And if you have woken up early because you can't sleep, go outside and watch the sunrise.
Yeah. We've had a great comment come through, just to kind of reiterate what you guys are saying about, you know, get off the farm and have a hobby. Rather than thinking you have to work 24/7. If you can't get the work done in 6.5 days, you won't in 7. So just get out and whatever it might be, invest yourself. And talking of mindfulness, I went to something earlier on this year called Focus Farmers. It was absolutely enlightening, and you know, I must admit I was a cynic before. I thought, mindfulness, what is this? And I went, and now it's just about being present in the moment. Instead of thinking of the 100 million things you've got going on in your head, focus on, like you're saying, Olly, just focus on that one thing and don't beat yourself up. So if anyone is interested in mindfulness, I would recommend going on Focus Farmers.
And actually, I think you can find a link to that on Farmwell as well.
But talking of which, Farmwell.
So FCN have just launched a new website in October, actually, at the same time that Doug Avery was touring. And the site is very much about encouraging farmers to not only look after the success and the resilience of their farm businesses, but also to look after their own personal, physical and mental resilience and well-being. And then also understanding where there's help and support available, whether that be in the form of a business consultant, support with their well-being physically or mentally, or mentoring, but just understanding where the issues are, where your stresses are, and when it might be a good idea to ask for support. So most of the things that I think that we've talked about tonight are linked to, and that website is for the use of the whole industry. So it lists every charity that's out there and every organisation that's out there supporting farmers, and it's just a really easy way to access the support that's available. But you know, we are going into a time of change, and there may be challenges for us. And I think from our point of view, we feel really strongly that you not only need to be looking at your business, you need to look after your own personal well-being and that of your family and that of your team as well. And I think if I know we invest so much time and money and conversation into maintaining a healthy farm business, but actually we don't really do that for ourselves. And I think we need to do that. If we pull together as an industry, which we're doing so well at the moment, then we can get through those periods of change and become a much stronger industry.
I agree.
And I know when a few years ago when we were obviously leaving the EU and we were looking at how the CAP was going to play out and what subsidies other farms were getting, and you know, some of the NFU staff were going all around the world looking at how it worked in New Zealand, how it worked in America and all this stuff. And I was like, never mind how much money they get, just go to the happiest nation of farmers and see how they do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually Scandinavia, and that's where they get 2 weeks holiday paid for. So.
Someone's actually asked if there's any more, any more examples of, you know, where this has worked quite well. And I said about Aaron's Nuffield, would explain a few of those.
Yeah, that, and they're obviously all still online. On the Nuffield website, aren't they, all the different things?
Yeah.
So it's Aaron Nake, and it's on mental health and wellbeing. I'm sure if you just Google it, you'll come across it.
Yeah. Right, last couple of slides. There we go. So to summarise.
Well, I suppose my takeaway messages would be prepared to seek support, with whether that be with your farm business or for your own personal well-being and that of the people around you. You know, be prepared to speak out And I think for anybody working within the industry as well as for farmers, it's so important. I think one of the most powerful things that you can do is understand what your local support network is, understand who those people are, even get to know them. But we will often say to farmers when we're talking to them, if they can just do one thing to help us as a charity, take our business card and put it in their wallet, so that when they're talking to somebody and they recognise that that person might need support, they feel confident in signposting. Because I think if we know the organisations that are out there and understand what they can do, we'll be much more ready to step forward and offer that support to people.
Yeah, and as we've been speaking tonight, some of the people who are tuned in have made their own suggestions about support mechanisms that I didn't even know knew existed, so we could bring them all in. Great. Olly, any last words from yourself?
I think it's if someone asks you how you are and you're not 100%, tell them, because you'll often find that you might end up having a bit of a whinge, then they'll probably have a bit of a whinge of what's wrong with their life that day, and the pair of you will come off the phone both feeling better. And that's the main thing, really. And shutting yourself away and thinking, oh, I'm not going to go to that meeting, or I'm not going to go out to that because I don't want to, I can't be bothered because of how you are. Just push yourself that bit to go, and then you'll probably find you'll feel a lot better there, because you can talk to people. Life's hard, and everyone's life's hard. It's not just yours.
Right, so we're going to carry on with a few questions. I know we're over our time, but we've still got 157 people who are listening in. So while we wait for a couple of questions to come in, we've got some, absolutely loads. There's a lot of people thanking you guys, so I'll start with thanking you. Thank you very much, Vicki, because that was insightful, extremely insightful, and hopefully everyone's taken something away from that. And Olly, thank you for being so open and honest. I mean, it's not like you to be open and honest, as everyone knows. As everyone's alluded to and asked the questions, everything will be available after the seminar this evening. So right, let's get through some of these questions. So we've got a lot of thank you. So also, we want to extend our thank you to you guys. There's been so much engagement on this webinar. I still can't quite believe that we run technical webinars, we run business webinars, we run environment webinars. We reach maybe 200 to 300 registrations, and this evening we had 670 registrations. That in itself says the whole story. And to have this much engagement, I mean, myself and my colleague Luke, we can't even keep up with the amount of questions that are coming through. So I think at the moment there's more comments than questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull off some of these comments because they're going to be useful to circulate and share around.
And we didn't get this. I've got a piece of paper in front of me now, but you can't see. But I'm going to put it on Twitter because I think it's really good to see where you are. It's basically a bit like a traffic light system. If everything's going okay, you'll always be in the yellow boxes. But if things start going wrong, I mean, it's not really a traffic light because it's yellow, orange, and blue. But you'll see, I suppose it's when you're feeling down, you're feeling blue. So I'm going to put it on Twitter because I think it's really good. And you'll probably find that you bounce around between the yellow and the orange nearly every day. But it's when you start going further over, that's when it can start to affect you and other people around you. So I'm going to tweet that now, and if Amy retweets it or whatever, or AHDB does, then you'll all see it.
So we've got a question. So FCN completely volunteer. So how can people get involved? Because we've got some people who want to actually volunteer.
Fantastic. If you phone our main office, we'll put you in touch with one of the local coordinators or the regional directors, and they'll arrange to meet up and have a conversation with you. But all we ask really is that people have an understanding of farming and the farming lifestyle, because that's why people come to us. We are a unique industry, and it's important that people understand farming lifestyle, really.
Fantastic. Okay. And then I guess there's a few questions just saying, just a reminder. So if somebody doesn't want to listen, if you're really struggling to say, you need help, but they don't want to listen, how do you go about that conversation?
I think it's really, I get this conversation a lot from people who are sort of working with farmers and they know things aren't right, but they don't know, they come away feeling as though they haven't done enough. And I think it's really important for our own well-being as well to recognise that that person's well-being is not necessarily our responsibility. We can't make them reach out for help. We can't solve their problems. We can be there for them. We can be a listening ear. We can gently encourage them, and we can signpost them to where support's available in the hope that they may take that up in their own time. But you can't strong-arm somebody into asking for help, unfortunately.
It's not. So a few people just saying thank you very much, and where are the support. So we've listed as many as we're aware of on these slides. We've come across a few others from everybody else, so we'll try and showcase these. I think Farmwell and Farming Community Network have the answers to these, and Jana has the directory of them all sort of locally. So I'd suggest people go into those resources. I think probably we're gonna wrap up there, but I'd like to thank everyone involved. I'd like to once again thank Olly and Vicki for taking the time, and especially Vicki for putting these slides together. Thank all these organisations for continuously supporting the Farming Network. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time out to listen to us on Blue Monday, and hopefully it's not so blue anymore. I'd like to think we've turned it into a positive yellow or a green.
And if anyone wants to come to the next Well Aware we're doing, it is in the Northwest. It's on the 31st of January.
So that's a week today.
Yeah, so to keep your eye out for the NFU posts.
Perfect. And my final thanks has got to go to Luke, who is our digital manager, sat at home making this all happen, even after a bit of a catastrophe with the fire in the office today. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to hearing all the good news about what's going on.